The sky was the color of ash. It was early, the kind of cold that crept to the seams of uniform and settled deep in the bones. The trenches were quiet, for once. Only the distant thud of artillery far to the east disturbed the stillness. Private William Hart sat on an overturned crate, his rifle resting across his knees. He was 24, though the lines around his eyes made him look older. In his hand, he turned a small folded note, edges frayed, words smudged by rain. He had read it so many times he no longer needed to open it. Come back to me. That was how it ended. No name, no flourish. Just that. Behind him, someone coughed. Male again, came a voice soft teasing. He turned and smiled. Clara Whitfield, the field nurse, leaned against the trench wall, her hands tucked into her coat. Mud streaked her skirt, and a strand of hair had escaped her cap. She looked out of place among the sandbags and the wire, like something the war had forgotten to destroy. He stood, embarrassed, tucking the note into his jacket. Just reading. She nodded, stepping closer. Big day tomorrow, isn't it? He nodded once. So they say. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and gun oil. Somewhere, a whistle blew for morning roll call. Clara looked at him carefully, studying the small tremor in his hands. You've not slept. He laughed quietly. No one sleeps the night before. She hesitated, then said, You should eat. I can bring you something from the mess. He shook his head. Not hungry. They stood in silence for a moment, the world narrowing to the sound of dripping water and distant thunder. You'll come back, she said finally. It was half a question, half a wish. William looked up at her. If I can. She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her. She had seen enough charges to know what came next, the whistles, the shouting, the silence afterward. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a locket, dented and darkened by time. Keep this, he said, just until I do. She looked down at it, her gloved hand trembling slightly. Why give it to me? Because you're real, he said. Because if I don't come back, I want someone real to remember I was here. For a moment, neither moved. Then she closed her fingers around the locket and nodded. I'll keep it safe. The morning bugle called across the line. William straightened his jacket and lifted his rifle. Duty was returning, as it always did. As he turned to leave, Clara reached for his sleeve. He stopped. Will, she whispered, when you go over, don't look back. He smiled faintly. Then you'll have to look for me. He started down the trench toward the front. Behind him, Clara stood still, clutching the locket, so tightly the metal pressed into her palm. She whispered the word she couldn't say aloud. Come back to me. The wind carried them away into the mist. The hours before battle were always the longest. They stretched, heavy and uncertain, like the air before rain. The men of the company sat along the trench walls, smoking in silence, staring at the dark slit of sky above them. Mud dripped from their boots, rats scurried along the boards, and somewhere in the distance an engine coughed to life. William Hart sat apart from the others. He had cleaned his rifle 3 times, checked his kit twice, then stopped pretending it mattered. When the whistle blew, it would come down to chance, to which shell landed where, to which man stumbled first. He took out the folded note again, now softened by dirt and sweat. He didn't read it this time. He only held it, the way one holds something sacred. Footsteps squelched along the duckboards. Clara Whitfield appeared at the corner of the trench, her coat pulled tight, the edges of her cap damp from mist. She wasn't supposed to be there, not this close to the line, but the look on her face told him she knew that. I brought you something, she said quietly. She opened her satchel and handed him a small tin wrapped in paper. Biscuits? He asked, trying to smile. She nodded. Stale ones, but better than nothing. He turned the tin in his hands. You came all this way to feed me? Her eyes lifted to his. No, to see you. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. The trench was suddenly too small, the air too close. He could hear the low hum of artillery, feel the vibration beneath his boots. He knew what was coming. They both did. Clara stepped closer, her breath visible in the chill. "You don't have to pretend you're not afraid," she said. He shook his head. "I'm not afraid to die. Just afraid it won't mean anything." Her gaze softened. "Then make it mean something. Come back." For a long moment, neither moved. Then she reached up and adjusted the collar of his coat, her fingers brushing against his neck, a small, human gesture in a place that had forgotten softness. It was enough to make him close his eyes. "I'll be watching when you go over," she whispered. "That doesn't sound like the safest place to be," he said. "I'll be there anyway." A whistle blew somewhere down the line, sharp and distant, the signal for readiness. The men stirred, their murmurs spreading like wind through tall grass. The air thickened. Clara's hand lingered against his chest, over his heart. For a heartbeat, the noise of the world disappeared. The mud, the guns, the fear, all of it fell away. There was only this, the weight of her touch, the warmth of breath between them, the ache of all that could never be said. Then she stepped back, her eyes glistening in the gray light. "Goodbye, Will," she said softly. He didn't say the word back. He couldn't. Instead, he lifted her hand and pressed it to his lips, one last act of courage before the charge. Somewhere beyond the trench, the sky began to thunder. The hour had ended. His rifle pressed to his chest, mud streaked across his face. The air was thick with cordite and damp earth, a taste of metal and rain. The whistle hadn't blown yet, but everyone was already halfway gone. Each man staring into that strip of sky, waiting for the moment his body would move before his mind could stop it. William turned his head just slightly. Behind the trench line, half shrouded by fog, he saw her. Clara Whitfield stood near the medical post, the pale canvas of her apron bright against the gloom. She was watching, hands clasped tight, lips moving in a prayer he couldn't hear. For a moment, she looked so small against the storm of war gathering behind her. He didn't wave. He just held her gaze, and for a second, just one, it felt like the noise around him faded. The whistle blew. The line surged forward. Boots hit ladders. Hands gripped rifles, and the men poured up and out of the trench into the morning fog. William's breath caught in his throat. The cold air burned his lungs. His legs moved before he could think, running through the mud, over shell holes, past barbed wire and bodies. The world erupted. Shells tore the air open. Dirt and smoke and screams mixed into one long, unbroken roar. He ducked, stumbled, kept moving. The weight of his rifle felt like part of his arm. He saw men fall, silhouettes swallowed by mist. He heard names shouted that vanished before they reached their mark. Every step felt like the last one he would take. Through the haze, a flash of white caught his eye, a torn bandage fluttering from a shattered post. He thought of her hands, of the way she had adjusted his collar that morning. He thought of the warmth of her touch in a world that had forgotten warmth. And then he saw the ridge. The enemy line loomed ahead, black against the pale sky. He felt the earth shake again, another shell landing close, and the ground gave way beneath him. He hit the mud hard, his rifle tumbling from his grasp. His ears rang, his vision blurred. The world was sound and motion, then nothing. When he blinked again, the sky above him was moving, a wave of smoke rolling across the clouds. He tried to push himself up, but his leg refused to obey. Somewhere nearby, a voice called for help, distant and fading. He reached for the note inside his jacket. "Come back to me." His fingers brushed the folded paper, still warm from his body heat. He smiled faintly. If this was the end, it was enough that she had seen him go. He closed his eyes, and the roar of battle dimmed to a heartbeat. When the gun stopped, the silence was worse. It came down like snow, slow, heavy, suffocating. The ground still trembled faintly, but the great roar of war had burned itself out. Now there was only wind, smoke, and the softest of things still burning. Clara Whitfield moved through the wreckage with a medic's bag slung across her shoulder, her boots sinking into the mud. The smell was everywhere, earth, smoke, blood, metal. She had learned not to look too long at faces. It was easier that way. Around her, stretcher bearers called out names, their voices echoing across the open field. Some men answered. Most did not. Clara paused beside a fallen figure, half covered in dirt. She knelt, brushing away the mud from the man's sleeve, a habit almost gentle. The insignia told her he was from Will's company. Her stomach tightened. She looked further ahead, beyond a ridge of shattered earth. The morning light struggled through the smoke. She saw movement, a hand faintly lifting. Clara ran. The mud caught her boots. The wind pulled at her cap, but she kept moving. When she reached him, he was lying on his back, one leg twisted beneath him. William Hart. His eyes fluttered open when she knelt beside him. For a moment, he looked like a man waking from a dream. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. His voice was rough, barely there. "I had to find you," she said. His uniform was torn, the fabric dark with mud and blood. She pressed her hand to his wound, her training taking over even as her throat tightened. "You'll be all right," she whispered, though they both knew it wasn't true. He smiled faintly, the same quiet, lopsided smile that had once made her forget the war for a heartbeat. "Did we win?" he asked. She shook her head. "No one wins out here." He laughed softly, but it turned into a cough. She held him, steadying his head in her lap. The smoke drifted around them like mist over water. "I thought I lost you," she said. "You did," he murmured. "Almost." He reached weakly toward his chest, fingers brushing her sleeve. "Did you keep it?" Clara pulled the small locket from her pocket. Its surface scratched and darkened. She held it up so he could see. "Always," she said. His eyes softened, and for a long moment neither spoke. All the world's noise had gone. The shouting, the shells, the commands, replaced by the fragile sound of breathing. He lifted his hand, resting it against her cheek. It was cold, trembling, but still alive. "I'm glad it was you," he whispered. Tears welled, unbidden. She leaned closer, her voice breaking. "Don't talk like that. You'll make it." But his gaze was already turning distant, his eyes reflecting the gray of the sky above. Somewhere behind them, the medics shouted for more stretchers. But she couldn't move. For one suspended moment, between the living and the gone, the war was quiet. She bent her head, pressing her forehead to his. The world around them faded, leaving only breath and memory and the space between two heartbeats. Then the wind carried the silence away. The hospital tents were quiet again. The wounded had been moved further back from the line, and the air smelled of disinfectant, smoke, and wet canvas. The rain had come and gone, leaving everything slick with mud. Clara Whitfield sat at a wooden table near the flap of the tent. The dim light of an oil lamp flickered beside her, casting long shadows across the paper in front of her. Her uniform was clean again, but the cuffs were still faintly stained, the kind of marks that never really washed out. She had been told to rest. Instead, she wrote, "Dear Mrs. Hart." The pen scratched softly against the page. She stopped after the greeting, staring at the words. Her hand trembled. How did you tell a mother that her son had died with mud on his face and rain in his hair? How did you explain that his last word had been her name, and hers too, whispered so quietly it might have been the wind? Clara put the pen down and pressed her fingers to her eyes. Outside, the world was gray. A wagon rumbled past, carrying the wounded away. Someone coughed. Someone else prayed. The front had already moved on. The war was always hungry for the next dawn. She looked down at the table. Beside the unfinished letter lay the small locket, still cold, still heavy with the shape of his name. She picked it up and opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, his mother, she guessed, and opposite it, a tiny folded scrap of paper. She hadn't seen that before. Carefully, she eased it open. The writing was rough, but she knew the hand instantly. "If I don't come back, tell her I was thinking of home. And tell her she made it bearable." Her breath caught. She folded the note shut, holding it to her chest. For the first time since the field, she let the tears come. The sound was small, the sound of a person trying not to be heard. A nurse passed by and paused, but said nothing. Everyone in the camp had their own ghosts. When the tears stopped, she reached to the pen again. Her voice was steady now, her words plain, the way soldiers' mothers deserved. He was brave. He did not suffer long. He spoke of home. She paused, then added a final line. He was not alone. She signed her name, folded the page, and sealed it with shaking hands. Then she reached for a second piece of paper. This one was smaller, unmarked. "Will," she wrote, "I kept your promise. The locket is with me. I'll carry it until this ends, until someone remembers us both." She didn't finish the rest. There was no way to end a letter to someone who would never read it. She folded it carefully, slipped it inside the locket beside his note, and closed it. The clasp clicked softly, the sound of something ending and beginning all at once. Outside, thunder rolled again. The war was moving closer. Clara stood, straightened her uniform, and went back to work. Weeks passed, but the war didn't slow. The names changed, the faces blurred. The wounded kept coming. Carried on stretchers, dragged through mud, laid down in lines beneath the torn canvas sky. And Clara Whitfield kept moving among them, hand steady, voice calm. She worked by instinct now. Bandage, morphine, pressure, breath, repeat. Each life that slipped through her fingers left a faint trace on her skin, like a ghost refusing to leave. But always, beneath her uniform, the locket rested against her chest. It was her anchor, small, cold, and heavier than it looked. Sometimes she caught herself reaching for it, feeling its outline through the fabric, as though to remind herself that he had been real. One night, when the guns went silent for a few hours, a mercy rare enough to feel unnatural, she stepped outside the tent. The moon was out, faint and blurred through drifting smoke. The field stretched away in silver and shadow, pocked with craters that glimmered faintly with water. She walked until she reached the edge of the camp. From there, she could see the faint glow of the front lines far away, a horizon that never truly darkened. For a long moment, she just stood there, listening to the wind. It carried the low hum of engines, the rustle of tents, the heartbeat of a world that refused to stop breaking. She opened the locket. The photograph had worn at the edges. The paper note inside, "Tell Clara she made it bearable," was soft from where she'd unfolded it again and again. She traced the letters with her thumb. "I'm still here, Will," she whispered. It wasn't a prayer. It was a statement of defiance. A voice called behind her. Another nurse, young, her face too clean, her eyes too new. "Sister Whitfield, they're asking for you." Clara turned. "I'll come." The girl hesitated, then said quietly, "Does it ever get easier?" Clara looked past her toward the tents, their canvas walls glowing faintly from lanterns within, like paper lanterns floating in a storm. "No," she said, "but it gets clearer. You remember why you stay." The girl nodded, not understanding yet. She would, someday. They all did. Clara tucked the locket back beneath her collar and walked toward the tents. Her steps were slow, but steady. The war had taken almost everything from her, but not that small, invisible promise she carried like a heartbeat. To remember, to endure, to keep kindness alive amid ruin. As she reached the tent flap, a gust of wind swept through the camp. The lanterns flickered. Somewhere, a church bell rang from a village half ruined and far away. For an instant, the sound reminded her of laughter, the kind she used to hear between the guns. And though she didn't smile, something inside her softened. She whispered again, almost to herself, "You made it bearable, too." Then she stepped back into the light, and the work began again. The gun stopped at 11. It was November 11th, 1918, the day the war ended, though it didn't feel that way yet. For hours before, rumors had moved through the camp like wind. It's over. They've signed. No one believed it. Not really. The war had lied too many times before. Clara Whitfield stood outside the field hospital. coat drawn tight against the cold. The air was still. No shell fire, no distant thunder. Just quiet. A strange, unnatural quiet that seemed to stretch forever. All around her, men were stepping out of tents, blinking at the sudden absence of sound. Some laughed, wild, disbelieving laughter. Others simply stared at the sky, as if waiting for the next bombardment to remind them it wasn't true. Clara didn't laugh. She didn't cry. She only listened. The silence was too heavy to celebrate. She walked between the tents, past the stretchers, the empty cots, the rows of boots lined up neatly against the canvas walls. Everywhere she looked, there were traces of what had been, the imprint of bodies, the ghosts of voices. In her pocket, the locket rested where it always had. Her fingers found it automatically, curling around the cool metal. When she reached the edge of the camp, she stopped. The landscape stretched out before her, scarred, endless, a wasteland of mud and wire. And yet, in the distance, she saw green. Grass, new grass, thin and fragile, pushing through the churned soil where men had fallen. She knelt and touched it. The blades bent beneath her glove, wet with dew. It was the smallest thing, but it felt like proof that the world still wanted to go on. Behind her, someone began to sing. A soldier's voice, cracked and uncertain, carrying the tune of "Keep the Home Fires Burning." One by one, others joined. The sound spread through the camp, not like triumph, but like remembering how to breathe. Clara stood again. The song drifted over the open fields, mingling with the wind. She opened the locket and looked at the note inside. Faded now, the ink barely visible. Tell her she made it bearable. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You did too." The wind caught her words and carried them over the field, across the trenches, the graves, the wire, and the years between them. When she opened her eyes again, she saw a group of nurses walking toward her. One of them, the young girl from weeks before, smiled uncertainly. "It's over," the girl said, her voice trembling. "We can go home." Clara nodded, though her gaze stayed on the horizon. Home. The word felt foreign. After everything, she wasn't sure where that was anymore, but she knew she had a promise to keep. "I'll be right behind you," she said. As the others walked away, Clara stood alone in the wind, the locket warm in her hand. The silence around her wasn't emptiness anymore. It was memory. She looked once more at the growing grass and whispered, "Rest now." The war was over, but the echo of love, brief, impossible, and real, remained. The war became memory long before it became history. Years passed. The uniforms faded to dust, the medals gathered tarnish, and the names of battles were carved into stone. But some memories refused to fade. Clara Whitfield lived quietly after the Armistice. She returned to England, to a small town where the church bells still rang and the fields grew green again. She found work at a hospital, this time one with windows that looked out over gardens instead of wire. The first spring after her return, she planted a small patch of white poppies outside her window. She said it was for peace, but privately she knew it was for him. Every morning, she would stand there with her tea, watching the petals move in the breeze. The war still lived in her hands, the tremor that came and went, the way she gripped her pen too tightly when she wrote. But the locket never left her. It had grown dull with age, the hinge slightly bent. She wore it tucked beneath her blouse, close enough to feel it when she breathed. Inside, the paper had yellowed, but the words were still there. Tell Clara she made it bearable. Sometimes, when the world was very still, she imagined she could hear his voice, not in the way ghosts speak, but in the quiet things, the creak of a door, the rustle of leaves, the hum of the evening air. It was enough. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a soldier's mother, Mrs. Hart. Her handwriting was fragile but neat. She thanked Clara for the letter she'd sent years ago, the one that had said he was not alone. At the bottom, she wrote, "If you ever come north, you are welcome here." Clara read the words twice. Then she folded the paper and placed it beside the locket on her desk. She didn't go north. Some things were better left in peace. That evening, she walked to the edge of the village, where the land dipped into fields of long grass. The sun was setting, not with fire, but with gentleness, the kind that turned everything gold. She stood there a long time, the wind moving through the grass in slow waves. From her pocket, she took the locket one last time. She held it open, reading the faded ink in the last light of day. "Thank you," she whispered, "for remembering me, too." Then she closed it, pressed it to her lips, and laid it in the grass among the poppies. The breeze lifted, soft and steady. The grass moved around it, swallowing it whole. When she turned back toward the village, the bell tower began to ring. Slow, calm, endless. And for the first time in years, Clara smiled. It wasn't joy. It was peace, the kind that only comes when a heart finally learns to live with its ghosts. Above her, the sky stretched wide and clean, the same color it had been on the morning before the charge. Time had carried them both home at last.